Good morning and welcome to the Investing Offshore webinar that's being run by the Export Council of Australia in conjunction with Kelly and Partners. This is a preliminary webinar to introduce Australian exporters to the local or the Australian tax issues that should be considered when investing offshore. This webinar is an absolute must for anybody who is interested in joining us throughout the course of the year in a series of webinars that we are running on specific tax issues relating to markets that you might be considering. What we have done is set this up as a separate webinar, and we invite everybody to join us to go through this particular webinar in advance before joining us on the specific market sessions that we're going to be running. So without further ado, I would be very delighted to now introduce our presenter today for this webinar, and his name's Tony Noons from Kelly and Partners, and he's going to be guiding you through all of the considerations from a local point of view here that very much interplay with all your offshore activities. So thank you for your time, Tony, today, and I'll hand the controls over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the Export Council for this opportunity to present. And hello, everyone. Today we're going to be covering some of the issues that you need to consider when investing outwardly, in other words, when you're going from Australia to other jurisdictions. Just before we start, I do need to mention that I do not know your specific circumstances, and thus this can't be seen as advice in any shape or form. So we're going to be covering a lot of issues very briefly, and you do need to get specific advice on your specific circumstances. The issues we're going to be covering, and we're going to start with sort of looking at some of the basic principles in terms of international tax, and then we're going to go into some very specific issues, tax residency. We're going to look at some investment structures. How do you get profits out of your jurisdiction once you're there? Issues such as thin capitalization and transfer pricing are quite important and need to be dealt with. And we're going to wrap up with tax risk management and some thoughts on that. So probably the most important thing when you're going offshore is that you need to get local legal and tax advice. Each jurisdiction is different, and it is important that you actually do speak not only to your Australian tax advisor but also to your advisor in the offshore jurisdiction. You can't ever assume that the laws are exactly the same as what they are in Australia. Even when the terminology is the same, it can be quite different in the other jurisdiction. An example of that is, for example, GST, which is a very different tax in Australia than what it is in the United States, yet they're both called GST. The individual double tax treaties of the different countries that you're going to be going to can also be quite different. Again, the terminology might be similar in different treaties, but the actual interpretation by the authorities in those other countries can be quite different, and the way that they apply the terms of the treaty can be quite different. So it is vitally important that you actually do get local advice. And also it's vitally important that you do ask your advisor on the other side as many questions as possible, because you can never ask too many questions. They often don't know your business, they don't know it in sufficient detail, and it is really up to you to make sure that they do get to that level of understanding and comprehension so that they can advise you. And the more they know about you and your operations and your future plans and what you plan on doing there, the more they're able to advise you and the better advice that you'll get.